Hate Russia, not the Russians. Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick, and I've talked a lot about war in this podcast. It's not because I'm a dark and depressing person, though on occasion I do brood, as does the great Edgar Allan Poe, and now I'm sort of stuck in this brooding voice. Let's see if we can keep it up for the entire podcast. I say to hate Russia and not the Russians. Now, obviously, that is a broad statement. There are many Russians who are hateful, just as there are many Americans who are hateful. But let us discuss the intricacies of the statement that brings to war, to the front of war. Now, when I say things along those lines, what I'm saying to you is, my God, it is a realization that when you fight a war, you are fighting a country, even though you must physically fight its people. You do not hate its people, and it is important that you do not hate its people. Let us delve deeper into this. When you engage in war with a country, who engages in the war? It is certainly not the people of the country, for most people would rather not live in war, they would rather live in peace. And there are many philosophies that would say all men must prepare for war, but these philosophies merely say it is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. They are philosophies of last resort. They are philosophies meant to prepare you for the eventuality of war, and we do live in a world where war is eventual. War is inevitable is the word that I was actually looking for. As we prepare for war, we must think to ourselves not that we hate the men and women fighting across the line, but rather we hate the government that sent them here. It is not their fault they were sent to the battlefield. Very few of them, even if they volunteered. It is not their fault. They wished to fight for their country, which is a noble and honorable thing to do, no matter which side of the line you fall on. Now, there are notable exceptions to this rule. For example, during the rise of Nazi Germany, we may rightly question the decisions that were made by people to ignore what happened in the run-up to the rise of Adolf Hitler in the government. But that is neither here nor there. Why is this subtlety of war so important to understand? You see, you need to have a sympathy for the men and women on the other side of the line. For though you will fight them, and of course, you will be asked to commit the ultimate act, you are both in the same spot. They fight for their country, you fight for yours. And it is not your fault at the end of the day, for it is the fault of the mostly old men in the government and in the halls of power who have determined that war is needed. A famous philosopher, whose name I currently forget, once said that war is negotiation by other means. War is negotiation by other means. Another one said that war is negotiation when all else has failed. But realize what is being said by that phrase. War is negotiation when all else has failed. It implies that negotiations were happening, but they did not succeed. Governments spoke to each other, and when the speaking of the governments failed, they resorted to war. And that resorting to war led to them going to battle with their men and women. Okay, I gotta drop the voice. Oh, I held that for a while, though. I was happy about that. Look, the reason I bring this up today is because, scrolling through Instagram, you see all these things that are celebrating the achievements of other countries. And I sort of realized as I was scrolling through, wow, we've gotten in a fight with a lot of these countries at some point or other. I mean, hell, go back far enough, the US in its nascent days fought most European powers, except France. I don't think we fought France ever. I'd have to go back. Excuse me. I'd have to go back and double check that, obviously. But I don't think we've ever really gotten on the wrong side of France. In fact, the French really liked us because we were super against the British for a while. I don't know if you guys remember that period in history. Might have started somewhere around July 4th, 1776. It started a little bit earlier than that, but July 4th, 1776 is kind of the big gun, the explosion day. But if we ignored all the achievements the British made up to that point, what would we do? This especially becomes important in today's day and age as we talk about kind of asymmetric wars that we get involved in a lot. For example, when we invaded Afghanistan or toppled the government of Iraq. And it got mixed up a lot, and that led to a lot of problems. Especially, I think, in Iraq, if I'm getting my more recent history correct. You have to hold on to the fact that as much as you're engaging in a war with somebody, you're fighting human beings who are the same as you in almost every way, except for the fact that they're on the other side of the line by some kind of genetic coincidence. Now, don't get me wrong. Wars sometimes happen, and wars are sometimes necessary. Was a military operation necessary to find Osama bin Laden after the 9/11 attacks? Quite honestly, probably. People who are too young to remember the attacks, the fear that gripped the country was insane. We didn't know if this could happen again, and quite honestly, the guy who took credit promised it would happen again. My rule with that sort of thing is sort of the same rule I have with people who hold American hostages. You don't get mercy. As much as it's a genetic coincidence that the hostages you are holding were born in the United States, they're still citizens of the United States. You release them immediately, or you get wiped off the face of the planet until you release them. Now, granted, I'm saying this into a rather fraught world right now, given the fact that especially we're dealing with a hostage crisis in Israel and the Gaza Strip. And I'm saying Israel and the Gaza Strip specifically. The West Bank, there's other controversies going on in the West Bank, and I don't know enough about the West Bank to speak knowledgeably on that area. I know just enough about the Gaza Strip to get myself in trouble. As long as any group holds American hostages, they get no sympathy. Now, group, bear in mind, group. In this case, we are fighting a government technically, but we're fighting we're really fighting a terrorist organization masquerading as a government. Credit to Hamas, they won a fair and free election. That doesn't change who and what they are, especially since they've had many and plenty of opportunities to improve the condition of the people living under their control, and they have chosen not to take that route. But Nick, American leaders have chosen not to do that too. Yeah, I know, we're working on that. Look, if you look at what's happening over there and have zero sympathy for the Palestinians, you are incorrect. You just are wrong. If you hate Palestinians, you're also wrong. If you hate Hamas, I can't blame you. And if you think that the hostage crisis should be resolved much more swiftly by perhaps having zero sympathy for Hamas and stop messing around with missiles that are blowing too many people up and rather perhaps, I don't know, bringing to bear the U.S. military apparatus since U.S. hostages are in play here, I might be able to agree with you. But that's an implied discussion for another day. I've reached the end of my time, and I wasted half your time with a ridiculous voice. I hope you enjoyed the voice. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Have a great day.